He would cut the electricity to our house every morning so I'd be left in the dark. Literally. But what I discovered years later about what he was doing during those hours when I was sitting in darkness was way worse than anything I could have ever imagined. If you're a woman who has ever felt suffocated in a relationship, who has questioned whether your suspicions were paranoia or intuition, then you need to hear this story. My name is Sarah. I'm 48 years old, and for the longest time I thought my story was about failure. Failure to keep a family together. Failure to choose the right man. Failure to protect my children from witnessing things no child should ever see. But today, 4 years since my divorce, I realize my story isn't about failure. It's about discovering that sometimes you need to lose yourself completely to find out who you really are. And man, did I lose myself. I lost myself in a way I wouldn't wish on anyone. But what happened after, well, that changed everything. I was 17 when my life turned upside down, and at the time I thought it was the end of the world. My dad was a sheriff in Franklin, Tennessee, one of those guys everyone respected when he walked down the street, and my mom had been working at City Hall for over 15 years. Our family looked like something straight out of a margarine commercial. You know when everything seems too perfect? That was exactly it, at least on the outside. But I always knew there was something different about me, a restlessness that consumed me from within, like I was a bird, trapped in a golden cage. The opportunity to study in Nashville came like a gift from heaven, but also like a bomb that exploded our family. I needed to get out of Franklin, where everyone knew everyone else's business, where dreams died before they could even be born. My parents were divided about letting me go to the capital. Dad thought it was dangerous. Mom knew it was my only shot at making something of my life. It was the first time I saw them arguing seriously. Those quiet kitchen conversations that stop when you walk into the room. To this day, I wonder if it was coincidence or destiny what happened next. Right after I left for Nashville, Dad got an offer to work in another city, an opportunity he couldn't turn down. It was like the universe was conspiring to spread our family across the four corners of Tennessee. Mom stayed alone in Franklin. At least that's what I thought at the time. Phone calls became less frequent, visits more rare, and when we did get together, there was this strange silence hanging in the air. I attributed everything to homesickness and distance, but there was something much deeper happening right under our noses. It was during one of those sporadic visits that I noticed subtle changes in Mom. She was different, lighter, like she had discovered something about herself. There was a new sparkle in her eyes, an energy I had never seen before. She started talking about a friend from work, someone who was helping her get through the loneliness of the empty house. In my teenage innocence, I was happy to know she had found companionship, a friendship that seemed so special. How wrong I was about what was really happening. The truth only came out years later, when Mom finally had the courage to tell me that that friend was actually the love of her life. She had discovered, in her 40s, that her heart beat for another woman, and that our whole apparently perfect marriage was just a social performance. While I was fighting to find my place in the world in Nashville, she was waging her own battle to find her true identity. What I didn't know is that her discoveries about love would deeply influence the choices I would make in the coming years, especially when it came to recognizing the signs of a relationship that might seem perfect, but hides dark secrets. At 20, I was living my best life in Nashville, finally free, studying marketing at Vanderbilt University, and feeling like the world was in my hands. It was at a fraternity party that I met Michael, and man, when he walked into that room, it felt like someone had turned down the volume on everything around us. He had that smile you see in movies, perfectly messy hair, and that confidence that made any girl melt. But it wasn't just his looks. He had this way of looking at you like you were the only person on planet Earth. At the time, I thought I'd hit the love lottery. What caught my attention first was how attentive he was. Different from any guy I'd met in Franklin or even in Nashville. He remembered every detail of our conversations, showed up with my favorite coffee between classes, and always knew exactly what to say when I was stressed about exams. Michael studied business administration, came from a well-off family. His dad had a thriving construction company, and he always talked about how he wanted to give me the life I deserved. Sounds too good to be true, right? But when you're 20 and have never been treated like a princess, you don't question these things. The first red flag I should have noticed was how quickly he wanted to know everything about my routine. He memorized my class schedules, knew where I was at every moment, and always casually showed up at places where I usually hung out. He said it was because he was crazy about me and wanted to spend every free second by my side. My college friends thought it was romantic as hell, and I felt special for having found someone so dedicated. He had this incredible ability to make any questioning from me seem silly. Baby, I just love you so much that I can't bear being away from you. The second warning sign came when he started making subtle comments about my friends and family. Nothing direct, nothing aggressive. He was too smart for that. It was more like, "Honey, I noticed your mom seems a little distant lately. Maybe she's dealing with some stuff?" Or, "That friend Sarah seems kind of fake, don't you think? I just want to protect you from people who might hurt you." He had this way of planting seeds of doubt that made you question your own instincts. And the worst part is that some of the things he said made sense. Mom really was different, and I was confused about her situation in Franklin. During our second year of dating, Michael started making plans for our future, as if it was obvious we'd spend our whole lives together. He talked about the house we'd build, how many kids we'd have, where we'd travel on our honeymoon. It was intoxicating to hear someone dream about you that way, especially when you come from a family that was falling apart. He had answers for everything, solutions for every problem, and always made me feel like I was lucky to have someone so determined by my side. "Don't worry about anything, sweetheart. I've got it all figured out for us." When we graduated, Michael already had our whole life mapped out. He'd join his father's company, I'd work part-time somewhere, not too stressful, and we'd start our family. He talked about it with such certainty that I started believing that's what I wanted too. After all, he knew all my fears about ending up like my parents, separated and lost. He promised stability, security, unconditional love, everything I thought I needed. At the time, I didn't realize he was carefully building a golden cage around me, a cage that would look so beautiful from the outside that I wouldn't notice when the door closed. What I didn't know is that in the coming years, especially when we got married and I turned 30, this obsessive attention would transform into something much more sinister. That man who memorized every detail of my life because he loved me too much was actually cataloging information to use against me later. But that's a story for another chapter of this nightmare. When I discovered that the man I shared a bed with for over a decade was living a double life that would make any Hollywood thriller look like child's play. At 30, I was living what everyone would call the American dream. A beautiful house in a safe neighborhood on the outskirts of Nashville. 2 beautiful children. A successful husband who worked at the family company. From the outside, our life looked straight out of a magazine. Michael had built exactly what he promised when we met in college. Stability, comfort, security. But if you looked closer, much closer, you'd start to notice the cracks in the perfect paint. Cracks that I spent years trying to ignore, thinking every marriage had its challenges. The first thing that changed were the suggestions about my appearance and behavior. Michael had always been the type who noticed details, but after we got married and had the kids, these observations became more specific. "Honey, maybe you should wear the blue dress instead. You know how much I love you in blue." Or, "Sweetheart, you've been talking a lot tonight. Let me handle the conversation from here." At first, I interpreted it as care, as a husband who wanted me to always be at my best. After all, he came from a family where appearances mattered, and I wanted to do my part to maintain our impeccable social reputation. Comments about my friends and family intensified after the children were born. Michael had a subtle way of questioning every relationship I maintained outside our marriage. "I noticed your college friend Emma always seems to have drama in her life. Maybe it's not the best influence for you right now?" Or, "Your mom calls too much, don't you think? We have our own family to focus on now." He never directly forbade anything, never made dramatic scenes. He was much smarter than that. He simply created situations where it was easier to cancel plans, where I felt guilty for prioritizing other people besides our family. The isolation happened so gradually that I didn't even notice. Calls to my Nashville friends became less frequent, because the kids need so much attention right now. Visits to Franklin to see Mom decreased because it's such a long drive with the children, and Michael works so hard during the week. My world was shrinking, circle by circle, until practically only our house, the kids' school, and social events related to Michael's work remained. And at those events, he always introduced me the same way. "This is my beautiful wife, Sarah. She's amazing with the kids and keeps our home running perfectly." During this period, Michael developed this strange obsession with security that at the time, I thought was dad paranoia. He installed cameras around the house, always knew exactly where I was through my phone's GPS, and started asking these casual questions about my day that seemed like disguised questionnaires. "So what did you do after dropping Emma at soccer practice? Did you go straight to the grocery store? That's weird because the GPS shows you stopped somewhere else." He always had an explanation. "I just worry about you and the kids, baby. There are crazy people out there." What haunts me most today, looking back, is how I normalized all of this, how I convinced myself that an attentive and protective husband was exactly what I needed, especially considering my own family's history. Michael knew exactly which buttons to push. He knew my fear of abandonment, my need for stability, my guilt about having a broken family. He used all of this against me, while building this narrative that we were different from other couples, that we had something special that needed to be protected. I had no idea that this protection would soon transform into a prison, and that the man who promised to give me the world was actually planning to take everything away from me. When I turned 35, a restlessness began to grow inside me, that same caged bird feeling I had as a teenager in Franklin. The kids were older, Emma was 9 and Jake was 6, and I finally had some free hours during the day. That's when I started feeling like I was wasting my life, that my marketing degree was collecting dust while I withered away in endless loops of carpool, grocery shopping, and playdates. I wanted more. I wanted to make a difference in people's lives, and that's when I discovered my passion for nursing. Little did I know that this innocent decision to want to grow professionally would become the trigger for a silent war inside my own home. When I mentioned to Michael that I was thinking about going back to school, his reaction was interesting. First came the condescending smile, the one I knew so well. "Baby, you're already so busy with the house and the kids. Don't you think adding school to the mix would be too overwhelming?" He had logical arguments for everything. Who would take the kids to activities? Who would prepare dinner? Who would take care of the house? When I insisted I could manage everything, he changed strategy. "Honey, we don't need the money. I'm doing great at work. Why put yourself through all that stress when you can focus on what really matters? Our family." But I was stubborn, a trait my mother always said I inherited from her. I enrolled in the nursing program at Nashville State Community College against all of Michael's arguments. The first week of classes was incredible. I felt alive again, using my brain in ways I hadn't in years. I'd come home excited, wanting to share everything I'd learned, but Michael always found a way to diminish my excitement. "That's nice, sweetheart, but Emma has been asking where Mommy is all day." Or, "Jake seemed really upset when I had to pick him up from school instead of you." Guilt trip after guilt trip, designed to make me question if I was being selfish. The sabotage started subtly. Michael would forget to remind me about important events for the kids that conflicted with my classes, or schedule family commitments exactly at the same time as my exams. When I complained, he always had a perfectly reasonable excuse. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't remember your school schedule. We can reschedule, if it's not too much trouble for everyone else." The most bizarre thing is that, at the same time he was trying to sabotage my studies, he started asking me to help with his college work. He was doing a part-time MBA. "You're so good with research, honey. Could you help me with this project while I grab drinks with the guys?" Then the sabotage became more direct. My book started to disappear from home. My laptop mysteriously started having problems always before important deadlines. The Wi-Fi would stop working exactly when I needed to access the college portal. Michael always offered solutions, of course. "Why don't you study at the kitchen table instead? I like having you close while I watch TV." But the kitchen table was right in the middle of all the family chaos, making concentration practically impossible. It was like he was systematically destroying my ability to succeed academically while maintaining plausible deniability. The turning point came during my second semester, when I was studying for a particularly difficult anatomy exam. Michael came home after happy hour with clients. He always had these social obligations that lasted much longer than normal. I was at the kitchen table, surrounded by books and notes, when he started an argument about how I was neglecting the family because of school. The argument escalated, and for the first time in years, I raised my voice. "I'm doing your MBA homework while you're out partying, and I'm neglecting the family?" The silence that followed was deafening. Michael looked at me in a way I had never seen before, cold, calculating, and absolutely furious. "You have no idea what I sacrifice for this family, Sarah. No idea at all." That night, as I tried to sleep, I couldn't stop thinking about his expression. There was something sinister behind those eyes, something that made me question if I really knew the man I shared a bed with for over a decade. And the worst part is that I was right to question, because what I discovered about his client meetings, about where he was really spending all those late nights, would make my worst nightmares seem like bedtime stories. But I was still years away from uncovering the truth about what my husband was really doing during all those hours that I was stuck at home, fighting to get an education that he was determined to destroy. At 38, I thought I had already seen the worst of Michael's controlling behavior. But boy, was I wrong. After that argument about my nursing studies, something changed in him. Or maybe something was finally revealed. His tactics became more aggressive, more calculated, like he had decided that subtlety wasn't working anymore. The first time he cut the electricity to the house, I thought it was some technical problem. It was a Monday morning. He left for work at 7, and mysteriously at 7:15 all the power went out. I called the electric company, and they said someone from the house had requested temporary service interruption. When Michael came home that night, I was furious. What the hell happened with the electricity today? I couldn't study, couldn't do anything. He looked at me with that expression of confused innocence I knew so well. Honey, I have no idea. Maybe there was some miscommunication at the electric company. You know how incompetent they can be. He even offered to call them the next day to resolve the problem. But something about the way he said it, the perfect timing of the interruption, made me suspicious. It was too much of a coincidence that this happened exactly on the day I had planned a marathon study session for my pharmacology exam. The pattern repeated every week for 2 months. Always on Monday mornings, always exactly 15 minutes after Michael left for work. I started taking notes, tracking every detail, because my gut was telling me this wasn't coincidence. When I confronted Michael again, he became defensive. Sarah, you're being paranoid. Do you really think I would sabotage our own house? That's crazy talk. But then he said something that sent chills down my spine. Maybe you should take a break from school. All this stress is making you imagine things that aren't there. It was during one of those blackout mornings that I decided to make a discovery that would change everything. I was looking for flashlights in our bedroom closet when I found a box I had never seen before, hidden behind Michael's winter coats. Inside, there were receipts from hotels, restaurants, florists, jewelry stores, dates that coincided perfectly with his supposed client meetings and business trips. My hands were shaking as I leafed through evidence after evidence of a double life that Michael was living right under my nose. The most sick part? Some of these receipts were from places we frequented together. The same restaurant where he took me for our anniversary. The same hotel where we spent our honeymoon. He was taking other women to our special places, creating new memories that contaminated everything I thought was sacred in our relationship. And there was more. Lingerie receipts for sizes that definitely weren't mine. Jewelry I had never seen. Even receipts for flowers that he never brought home to me. Each piece of paper was like a knife twist in my heart. But the real plot twist came when I found his phone records printed and organized by date. Michael was obsessively organized, something I always admired, but now was working against him. During all those mornings when he cut our power and I was left in the dark, unable to study, he was having extensive phone conversations with at least 3 different numbers. The irony was devastating. While he was literally keeping me in the dark, he was illuminating other parts of his life that I didn't even know existed. And the most twisted part of all this? He was accusing me of potential infidelity because of my nursing school, saying that healthcare environments were full of temptation, while he was the one building an entire secret universe of betrayal. That night, when Michael came home with his usual, "How was your day, sweetheart?" routine, I looked at him, and for the first time saw him for what he really was, a complete stranger. A stranger who had been systematically destroying my education, my confidence, my sanity, while simultaneously living a life that made mine look like amateur hour in comparison. I sat there during dinner, watching him interact with Emma and Jake like the perfect father, and realized I was married to someone I didn't know at all, someone who could lie to my face every single day for years, and never show a hint of guilt or remorse. The scariest part wasn't even the cheating. It was realizing that if he could orchestrate such elaborate deceptions about something this big, what else was he hiding? What other parts of our life together were complete fabrications? As I tucked the kids into bed that night, A thought crept into my mind that I couldn't shake. If he was willing to sabotage my education and our home's electricity, what lengths would he go to keep his secrets safe? Little did I know I was about to find out, and that the answer would be much worse than anything I could have imagined. At 43, after discovering that box of receipts and phone records, I spent months living in a kind of emotional limbo. Imagine knowing that your entire marriage is a lie, but having to wake up every morning and pretend everything is normal to protect your children. Emma was 14 and Jake was 11, old enough to sense tension, but young enough to be devastated by a separation. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, planning my escape while Michael slept peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about his next rendezvous. The cognitive dissonance was eating me alive. How do you share a bed with someone you discovered is a complete stranger? The last straw came on a Tuesday morning in March. Michael left for work as usual, and exactly 15 minutes later, our electricity went out again. But this time, instead of feeling helpless, I felt pure rage. Rage that had been building for years, rage that I had suppressed to keep peace, rage that finally found its voice. I grabbed my car keys, drove straight to the electric company, and demanded to speak with a supervisor. I want to know exactly who has been authorizing these service interruptions at my house. The truth was even worse than I suspected. Michael had set up an automated system to cut our power remotely, using some kind of contractor account he had access to. When I confronted him that evening, I didn't even try to hide what I knew anymore. I found the receipts, Michael. I found the phone records. I know about the electricity. I know everything. The mask finally dropped completely. No more charming smiles, no more gaslighting, no more pretend confusion. He looked at me with pure contempt and said, "So what are you going to do about it, Sarah? You have no money, no job, no life outside this house. Who's going to believe you? Who's going to want you?" That's when I realized that all those years of isolation weren't just control, they were preparation. He was preparing for exactly this moment, when I would discover his secrets. But Michael underestimated one thing: the same stubbornness my mother always said I inherited, the same determination that took me to Nashville when I was 17. I started planning my exit strategy meticulously. I secretly consulted with a lawyer, opened my own bank account, and began documenting every single incident of his controlling behavior. The hardest part was continuing to live in that house, pretending to be okay, while I gathered evidence. Emma and Jake sensed something was wrong. Kids always do, but I couldn't tell them anything yet. I had to protect them from the chaos that was about to unfold. The day I filed for divorce, Michael's reaction was terrifying. I had expected anger, maybe some bargaining, perhaps even relief that he could finally be free to pursue his other relationships openly. Instead, I got something much more sinister. He became calculating, strategic, like a predator who had just realized his prey was trying to escape. "You think you can just take my children away from me? You think you can destroy everything I've built? Sarah, you have no idea what I'm capable of." The way he said it, so calm and so cold, made my blood run cold. This wasn't the passionate reaction of a hurt husband. This was the calculated response of someone who viewed me as property. The custody battle that followed was brutal beyond anything I could have imagined. Michael had advantages I didn't. More money, an established career, connections in the legal community through his father's business. But I had something he didn't expect me to have: documentation. Every receipt, every phone record, every incident of the power being cut, every controlling behavior I had been tracking for months. My lawyer said domestic control cases were often hard to prove, but I had created a paper trail that told a story clearer than fiction. Still, it took 8 months of legal battles, depositions, and court appearances before I finally got primary custody. Moving out of that house with Emma and Jake was simultaneously the most terrifying and most liberating experience of my life. We rented a small apartment in Nashville. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. No cameras, no one monitoring my every move, no one cutting off our electricity. For the first time in over a decade, I could breathe, but as I unpacked our belongings in our new place, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Michael's parting words kept echoing in my head. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." I thought I knew him well enough to predict his next moves, but I was about to learn that even after 11 years of marriage, I still had no clue about the true depths of his darkness. At 44, I was starting life from scratch with 2 traumatized children and a bank account that barely covered the first month's rent. Our apartment in Nashville was modest. 2 bedrooms, small kitchen, and constant traffic noise that reminded me every second that we were in completely new territory. Emma and Jake had to share a room for the first time in their lives, and I slept on the living room couch for the first few months until I could afford to buy a used bed. But you know what's crazy? Even with all this financial instability, I felt more at home in that cramped apartment than I ever felt in the mansion I shared with Michael. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't tense. It was peaceful. The first months as a single mother were a reality shock that no self-help book can prepare you for. Suddenly, I was responsible for everything, from fixing a leaky faucet to explaining to Jake why Daddy didn't live with us anymore. Money was so tight that I started making detailed spreadsheets of every penny spent, cutting coupons like my grandmother did during the Great Depression. Emma, who had always been mature for her age, started working part-time at a clothing store after school, and the guilt I felt about that was overwhelming. But she told me something that still gives me chills. Mom, for the first time I feel proud to be part of this family. Before it was just performance. It was during one of those difficult nights, when bills were scattered across the kitchen table, and I was trying to figure out how to pay for electricity and buy food, that I remembered my old dream of being a psychotherapist. Remember when I mentioned that Michael sabotaged my nursing studies? Well, during those mornings in the dark, I used to daydream about working helping people who went through trauma. Ironically, without realizing that I was one of those people. I researched psychology programs at community colleges and discovered that with my life experience and some preparatory courses, I could qualify for scholarships. For the first time in years, I had a goal that was mine, nobody else's. Going back to school at 44 was both humiliating and empowering. I was the oldest in the class by at least 15 years, sitting next to kids the age Emma would be in a few years. But when we started studying trauma, dysfunctional family dynamics, and manipulative behavior, I felt like I was reading my own biography. My professors noticed that I had an intuitive understanding of these concepts that only comes from lived experience. One of them told me, "Sarah, you're not just learning this material, you're healing through it." And he was right. Every class was like a free therapy session where I finally understood that nothing that happened to me was my fault. Emma and Jake started to flourish in ways that completely surprised me. Without the constant tension from the previous house, without the eggshells we all walked on to avoid disturbing Michael, they became different children. Jake, who had always been shy and anxious, started telling jokes during dinner. Emma stopped wearing excessive makeup, something she started doing at 12 because Michael always commented about how women should present themselves. We started new simple traditions, movie nights on Friday with cheap popcorn, free walks in the park on Sundays, and honest conversations about feelings we had never had before. We were poor in money, but rich in authenticity. But what marked me most during this period was discovering strengths in myself that I didn't know existed. When the car broke down and I didn't have money to fix it, I learned to work on engines by watching YouTube videos. When Emma got sick and needed expensive medicine, I negotiated a payment plan with the pharmacy like I was an executive closing a big deal. When Jake was bullied at the new school for being the divorce kid, I scheduled a meeting with the principal and defended my son like a lioness defending her cub. Every challenge overcome showed me that the fragile and dependent woman Michael had created was never who I really was. But not everything was roses in our rebirth. As the months passed and our new routine established itself, strange things started happening. Letters would arrive in my name for addresses I had never lived at. My car was accidentally scratched 3 times in 2 months. Emma swore she saw Michael's car driving slowly past our street several times, but when I looked, there was never anything there. His friends would comment that he asked questions about our new life, always casually, always as a concerned father. At first, I attributed everything to post-trauma paranoia. After all, I was learning in classes that hypervigilance was a common symptom of psychological abuse. But then Jake came home one day with a story that made my blood run cold, and I realized that maybe my paranoia wasn't paranoia after all. 2 years after our divorce, when I was finally starting to feel safe in our new life, Michael showed up at my door with a bouquet of red roses and that smile I knew so well. "Sarah, I made terrible mistakes. I've been in therapy, I've changed completely. and I realize now how much you mean to me. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The kids were at school, and he knew exactly what time to choose to catch me alone. What disturbed me most wasn't the attempted reconciliation itself. It was how he knew specific details about our new routine that he shouldn't know. How did he know that Tuesdays were my free days between classes? How did he know that Emma had changed shifts at work and Jake had soccer practice? During the following months, Michael developed an approach strategy that was simultaneously subtle and scary. He started showing up casually at places we frequented, at the grocery store where I shopped, at the cafe where I studied, even at the kids' school during events. Always with a perfectly reasonable excuse. What a coincidence running into you here. I was just passing by. But coincidences don't happen with this frequency. He had information about our lives that he could only have obtained through systematic surveillance. And what was most disturbing is that he always brought gifts. Not for me, but for Emma and Jake. Expensive gifts I couldn't buy, creating a dynamic where he was the cool dad and I was the restrictive mom. What I discovered about his post-divorce relationships made me understand that I wasn't paranoid. I was a target. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Michael had at least 4 serious relationships in 2 years, and they all ended the same way. The women ran from him claiming obsessive and controlling behavior. One of them, Jessica, had even gotten a restraining order because he installed a tracker in her car. Another, Monica, told friends that he showed up at her workplace just to say hi so frequently that she almost got fired. The pattern was always the same. Initial charm, excessive attention, gradual control, and when they tried to end it, he became persistent. But his obsession with me was different from the others. With the girlfriends, when they ran away, he would eventually give up and move on to the next victim. With me, it was like he couldn't accept that the game was over and that he had lost. Emma told me that during weekend visits at his house, he constantly asked questions about me. How is your mother? Is she dating anyone? Does she seem happy? Jake, more innocent, would sometimes repeat these questions to me without realizing he was being used as a source of information. Michael was collecting data about our lives through our own children, turning them into unwitting spies. The last straw came when Jake came home from a visit to his father, completely upset. Mom, Dad asked me weird questions today. He wanted to know if you sleep well, if you leave the bedroom window open at night, if you check that the doors are locked before going to sleep. My blood ran cold. These weren't questions a curious ex-husband would ask. These were questions someone planning something would ask. When I asked Jake why Daddy wanted to know these things, his answer haunts me to this day. He said he still worries about our safety, and that sometimes he drives by our street at night to make sure we're okay. Michael was admitting to a 13-year-old child that he was watching our house during the early hours. That night, I installed cheap security cameras at the entrances to our apartment and started documenting all the casual encounters and strange behaviors. What I discovered in the recordings from the first week made me question whether I should go to the police or simply take the kids and disappear. Michael wasn't just driving by our street occasionally. He was parking across the street between 2 and 4 in the morning, 3 times a week, just watching our building. Sometimes he would stay there for hours, smoking cigarette after cigarette, like he was studying our routine or waiting for what exactly? The most disturbing thing of all is that when I confronted my lawyer about this evidence, he told me that technically, Michael wasn't violating any law. He has the right to drive on public roads, Sarah. Unless he enters the property or makes direct threats, there's not much we can do legally. That's when I realized Michael was smarter than I ever imagined. He knew exactly how far he could go without crossing legal lines, but creating an environment of fear and uncertainty that kept me constantly alert. It was a sophisticated form of psychological terrorism, and he was executing it with the precision of someone who had planned every move carefully. Today, almost 4 years after our divorce, I still sleep with a baseball bat beside my bed and check the security cameras every morning before the kids wake up. Michael continues his mind games, always evolving his tactics, always finding new ways to remind me that he's still there, in the shadows of our new life. And the question that keeps me awake some nights isn't whether he'll escalate this obsessive behavior, it's when. Because men like Michael don't just give up and move on. They wait, they plan, and when you least expect it, well, that's a story that's still being written. And I pray the ending won't be as dark as my worst nightmares suggest. So that's my story. Or at least the part I can tell for now. because the truth is that some stories don't have definitive endings, especially when you're dealing with someone who sees you as property he lost and is determined to get back. Michael is still out there, in the shadows of our new life, and I wake up every day not knowing what new psychological game he'll try. But here's what I've learned. Surviving isn't just escaping. It's learning to live, knowing that some nightmares never really end, and still choosing to be happy despite it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever lived through something similar? Have you ever normalized behaviors that you now realize were warning signs? Or maybe you're living through this now and are finally starting to connect the dots. Leave it in the comments. Tell me your story. Tell me what resonates with you. Because the more we talk about this, the more women we can save from falling into the same trap. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video. You might be saving someone's life without even knowing it. What other stories do you want me to tell? Do you want to know more about how I rebuilt my financial life from scratch? About how I explained all this to my children? Or maybe you want me to talk about the warning signs every woman should know? Tell me in the comments what kind of content you want to see more of here, because I have many stories to tell and many lessons to share. If this video touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because I'm building a community of women who support each other, who share real experiences, and who aren't afraid to talk about subjects everyone else prefers to hide. Together, we're stronger. Together, we can change narratives. And together, we can ensure that other women don't go through this alone.